This is Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. From the corporate office to the cab of a truck, they're here to inspire and empower women in all professions. So gear down, sit back, and enjoy.
Welcome. We're an award-winning show dedicated to empowering women in every profession through inspiring stories and expert insights. No topics off limits on our show. We power women on the road to success with expert and celebrity interviews and information you need. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Kathy.
True crime is all the rage today, with podcasts, audiobooks, and TV shows popping up everywhere. The authors that write true crime are the creative fuel behind this dynamic genre. Ever wondered what it's like to interview serial killers? Diane Fanning has done it many times. She's a well-known and highly accomplished true crime author and mystery novelist. Her books have captivated many readers and gotten many accolades. Diane has had a stellar career as a writer, which began after her youngest went to college. Before that, she was in the advertising industry, where she won over 70 Addy Awards when she wrote for radio, TV stations, and an ad agency. Diane's book, Written in Cold Blood, was nominated for the highly coveted Edgar Allen Poe Award. She says the most fulfilling role as a true crime author was the one she played in getting justice for wrongfully convicted Julie Ray, whose story was featured on 2020. Diane's work has also played an important role for women. She was thanked by staff at domestic violence shelters around the country for her book, Gone Forever, which they consider a pivotal book for women. Diane has received numerous awards for her work and dedication to many nonprofit causes, including the 2001 Freedom Fighter Award from the National Association for Choice in Giving and the 2011 Defenders of the Innocent Award by the Illinois Innocence Project. Diane has been interviewed by major media outlets around the country, and we have the honor of having her on the show with us. Welcome, Diane. Thank you for being with us.
It's always nice to be with other women warriors.
Amen to that.
And yeah. Wow, that was quite the introduction there, Shelley.
Diane, you are such a trailblazer, and you are a true warrior in so many respects.
I do what I can, and I try to always do what's right.
Absolutely, and that's reflected in your books. And you've captivated so many readers. Your books are a page turner. How do you sleep at night with some of the stuff you cover? I would think you'd have nightmares.
It's very funny. You know, family and friends ask me that all the time. And I think that the fact of the matter is, when I sit down and write, I'm sort of exorcising those demons, so they're not haunting me at night. I mean, I think everybody in my family has had a Tommy Lynn Sells nightmare, but I never have.
Wow. Well, I was reading that in your bio, you got an interest in true crime at an early age, and maybe it was even inspired after you were nearly abducted at the age of 9. I mean, that's just chilling. You remembered his license plate, which helped authorities arrest him. Did you want to talk about that experience? I mean, that had to have been terrifying.
Oof. It really left a permanent mark, that's for sure. I lived in a neighborhood that was part suburban and part rural. So you'd have a bunch of houses, and then you'd have a field of cows, and then a field of corn, and then a bunch more houses. Well, my friend Sherry and I were walking down the road, and we were headed to Pencil's, which was a little convenience store. And we went there often to get sodas and candy bars. And while we were walking down this hill, a car pulled up next to us and asked for directions. We were trying to explain to him where he said he wanted to go. And he said, "I'm really not understanding. Could you come here and show it on my map?" And he threw up at his car door, and I walked over. But instead of a map, he was exposing himself.
Oh, my gosh.
Ah.
Wow.
Before I could react, he had his hand on my upper arm and was pulling on me. I was pulling back as hard as I could, but I knew it was only a matter of time. And just then, another car came up over the hill and laid on its horn. And that guy took off with his car door still open.
Wow.
And I was a big fan of the Dragnet TV show, and I knew just what Sergeant Friday wanted me to do in a situation like this, and so I memorized his license plate number.
Wow.
When I got home, my mother called the police and reported his number. In a couple of days, they found him, and in the trunk of his car, they found evidence that he had abducted and sexually assaulted an 8-year-old girl the month before.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
And I was left with a couple of questions. Like, why me? Why did he see me on the side of the road and think I'd be a good victim? And how could anybody on earth do that to another person?
Yeah.
I didn't understand that at all. So back then, if you were 9 years old, you were not allowed to go into the adult section of the library without parents' permission. So I had to drag my mother into the library to give permission for me to go into the adult section, because I wanted to read about criminal psychology. I wanted to understand. It was my way of coping.
Sure.
And a lot of the books were way over my head, but I plowed through them with the dictionary by my side and did the best I could to try and understand. And I think that is why I reacted so intently to the story of Crystal Searles. Little Crystal was 10 years old, and she was staying at a friend's house in Del Rio, Texas, out in the rural area. And a man came into the room. Her friend Katie was on the bottom bunk, and she was on the top bunk. And he strangled and sliced the throat of Katie, and she watched as her friend died.
Oh, me Lord.
And she threw her hands over her neck and begged him not to cut her throat. But he just pushed her hands out of the way and ran the knife across her throat.
Oh.
She laid there listening until she heard the sound of his vehicle starting up and heading down the dirt road. There was one adult in the house, and Crystal just assumed that everybody else in the house must be dead, or Katie wouldn't have been killed. And so she got out of the house. She headed down the gravel road in her bare feet, where there's tarantulas and cactus and rattlesnakes and scorpions, and went to the house of Mr. Butts. And Mr. Betts, excuse me. Mr. Betts got up every year to watch the new year come around all across the world. So even though it was only 4 a.m. on January 1st, he was up watching as the world turned to a new year. She knocked on his door, and he came there and saw her standing there with this huge clot of blood. She couldn't speak, but he brought her in, and she motioned for a paper and pencil and said, "Everybody's dead."
Oh.
And he, of course, called an ambulance. They sent in a helicopter, and they airlifted her to San Antonio. And she went immediately into surgery. Her vocal cords had been severed, and the outside sheath on her aorta had been nicked another 0.5 millimeter, and she would have bled out right there.
Oh my God.
Wow.
But they sewed her up, and so, of course, when she came out, she still couldn't speak. But she motioned again for a paper and pencil, and she wrote, "Get the cops." And they brought in the cops, and they brought in a forensic artist. And that little traumatized 10-year-old girl had the fortitude to communicate well enough that they knew that night who had committed this act, who had killed her friend and left her for dead. And they went out and arrested him. And in the process of arresting him, they aborted his plan to murder someone else that evening.
Wow.
Wow.
And when they were taking him into jail in the sheriff's car, he told the investigator, well, I guess you want to know about all of them.
All of them.
All of them?
Oh, my Lord.
Well, there
my
were
God.
no one else in that house had died, but he confessed to more than 50 murders.
50.
50? 50?
Wow.
He said he's only 70% done.
70% done. He had a goal?
What the heck?
He said, so he confessed to 70% of them.
Oh, I see.
Oh, yeah, no.
They have been able to confirm well more than 20, but some of them were just too vague and they went back too many years. Like when he says, I killed a black man in Detroit in the early 80s and threw him into a dumpster. Well, how are you going to figure that one out?
Yeah.
He didn't know names, didn't know the exact year. But yeah, he had a 2-decade killing spree.
Now, what
Went
was...
from coast to coast.
Wow. What was the name of this serial killer?
Tommy Lynn Sells.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
And that Through the Window turned out to be my very first true crime book. And I'll tell you, Tommy taught me a lot. He was a horrible, horrible individual, but he was very open with me. And he, I mean, even most serial killers won't admit how much they enjoyed the kill, but he did.
So you actually met him in prison?
I visited him in prison more than 20 times.
Oh, my God. That takes cojones. I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, the first time I was terrified, but most of the time I was okay with it because, I mean, there was plexiglass between us and big beefy men walking around with guns. So, I mean, I knew logically I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one time when I told him something that a DA said to me about him, and it got him so angry. He just blew up and pounded on the desk.
God.
Whole face changed, the shape changed, his eyes changed color. I realized that at that moment I was seeing the face that his victim saw right before they died.
Oh, man.
Face of the devil.
I was going to say the face of a devil. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he taught me a lot about how psychopaths think and how they come up with a logical stream of why, and how it wasn't really my fault. It was either something I had to do or something that was enabled by other people. Like there was this little girl he killed. She was home from school because she had a doctor's appointment. And when she finished the appointment, she went down to this playground and was swinging on the swings. Well, right next to where the playground was, there was an overgrown area. And just past that was a railroad tracks where Resendez had left 2 bodies. So Sells drove up and saw her on the swing. And he went out, pushed her off the swing, grabbed her, took her into the undergrowth, and sexually assaulted her and murdered her. And he said to me, well, it wasn't my fault. If the people in that community cared about their children, they would have cleaned up that area and I wouldn't have had a place to take her.
Wow.
Jeez.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
If you're enjoying this informative episode of Women Road Warriors, I wanted to mention Kathy and I explore all kinds of topics that will power you on the road to success. We feature a lot of expert interviews. Plus, we feature celebrities and women who've been trailblazers. Please check out our podcast at womenroadwarriors.com and click on our episodes page. We're also available wherever you listen to podcasts, on all the major podcast channels like Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, you name it. Check us out and bookmark our podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other sites. And tell others about us. We want to help as many women as possible. What's it like to delve into the criminal mind? To really get into the criminals' heads by interviewing them and writing about the heinous crimes they've committed. What's it like to come face to face with a killer? Diane Fanning has interviewed many serial killers and isn't haunted by their terrible crimes as she writes their stories. She says her writing sheds the demons she writes about. But it hasn't been easy. Diane's been scared a few times as she sat across from the convicted demons who have graced the pages of her best-selling accounts. Her true crime books have received accolades and awards and brought awareness of the pathological nature of people and the crimes they can commit. Diane has had an intense curiosity about the pathology of the human mind ever since she was nearly abducted by a sexual predator at the age of 9. Her work as a true crime writer and novelist has captivated many readers. Diane has been sharing some chilling accounts with us and what it's like to be a true crime author. Diane?
Do you have a theory? I mean, you've interviewed a lot of these criminals. Do you have a theory of what makes them tick? I mean, in my mind, it can't be a normal person. I mean, like, they have no conscience, as you had said before the interview. What's with that? I mean, what would motivate that?
Sometimes it is things that happen very early in their childhood can warp them that way. Sometimes it can be just a genetics that set them on that path. And then there's some sort of mystery ingredient that nobody really knows what it is. Why? I mean, you look at Tommy and he had brothers and sisters and none of them were treated well, but he's the one who turned out to be a serial killer.
Yeah.
And you can go back to his mother and blame her for some of it because when Tommy told me his story about the pedophile his mother let him go live with and about the other things that happened to him in his childhood, I thought it was horrific, but I knew that being a psychopath, he's not honest. So I called his mother and I told her, I said, just tell me what Sells told me that was wrong. And I laid the whole story out. And she said, so what? A lot of people had it worse and they don't go around killing people. This is a woman who, when Sells was 18 months old and his twin sister died, she handed him over to her aunt to raise. The little boy became part of that family where there were 2 other children who just adored and doted on him. That aunt wanted to get custody of Sells so he could go to public school. But when she called and asked to get custody or guardianship, Sells' mother blew up, came and jerked him out of that house and wouldn't let them see them ever again. Now there is a second separation, first from his twin, then from his aunt and new family. And when she got tired of having him around, she turned him over to a pedophile.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, God.
So perhaps if he'd had a different upbringing.
But aren't there, I mean, there's lots of psychopaths out there that have had normal families, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah.
That turn out
Yeah.
the rotten
There
apple.
are. And
Like
a lot of
Jeffrey
that is genetic. Yeah. And some of it is brain injury, can throw things off. And, if you're born without a conscience, it's hard to nurture that.
Yeah. I've heard there's a problem with the frontal lobe with people.
Quite often. Yeah. And there's a special kind of dementia in older folks that hits the frontal lobe. And when you see that happen, it gets rid of their inhibitions. So the guy who's always been the perfect gentleman suddenly is making lewd comments or looking at pornography online or something like that, because all the social behavior that he'd been exhibiting all his life is suddenly let loose, and there's nothing to tether him back to who he is.
It's scary. I must commend you for covering these stories. Certainly, it would be intimidating to actually meet with people like that.
How do you rid yourself of all that negativity? Does that tend to cling on to you when you go home or when you want to have a peaceful moment?
I write, and that gets a lot of it away. I also, I'm a big believer in the power of music.
Oh.
And I'll listen to my favorite music at high volume, particularly when I was on my way back from death row. I would have that radio rocking. And I think that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I read a lot. And when I'm writing something this intense, I tend to gravitate towards mysteries with the comical side, like Carl Hyacin or Janet Ivanovich, stuff like that. Because you got dead bodies, but it's uplifting at the same time.
Music is therapeutic. There's no doubt about that. And you are a brave lady to be doing all of this, though. I wanted to share something. When I was a little girl, I actually was face to face with a serial killer.
What?
At the age of 12, he came to our house and wanted to talk with my mother. And I remember opening the door. There was somebody lurking in the bushes outside the front door, I immediately thought that was odd. And I remember looking at this guy, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I sensed evil. And I think maybe children are a little more in tune with some of that. My dad came to the door, and they asked for some fake address or something. It was a ruse, and they wandered off. Well, a couple weeks later, this guy was arrested with his associate, who was a 16-year-old, for serial killing women around the area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember seeing the newspaper and saying to my mother, "Mom, that's the guy that came to the front door." And
Oh my God.
in this particular case, his brother was a serial killer, but he preferred men. So it was kind of a family thing. And the dynamics I'd read about this, his father encouraged those brothers to fight with each other and really, get mean and violent. And it was just an abusive background. But the point I was trying to make, you sense evil. And I have sensed that only a couple of occasions. I think the majority of people are not basically evil, but that's what I felt. Did you feel that when you were interviewing some of these people, Diane?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'll leave the person nameless, but there was a book that was written, and it was really a hot book at the time it came out. And I don't know why, but a little dubious about it. And I sat down to watch an interview on TV with the author. And it didn't take me long watching him to know there's something wrong with that man. He is not right. And he has proven since then that he wasn't. But I can pick up on those things fairly well. And maybe it's because I've been around so much of it.
Your books are educational.
I think that by reading these cases, although they're really creepy in many, many cases, this educates the public. I think that that's a good thing.
Well, when I talk to high school students, I talk about the red flags in relationships because there's a lot of that people overlook or don't notice that or even accept as okay, it's a little weird, but they're red flags and they're signals of trouble, and it's best to know more so that you can watch for them and keep yourself safe and keep the people you care about safe.
Absolutely. You have to walk through life with your eyes wide open and have situational awareness. That's super important.
You know, when I was a young nurse, I spent a month when I was training in a psychiatric hospital, and it was very shocking to me because it's a different kind of nursing, right? You're not looking at blood, guts, open wounds, and it was very disturbing to me, I guess, to be looking at these people who seemed normal, and some of these young men were handsome, and but the psychopathy going on in the mind, I'm like, it was too much for me. I knew that it wasn't the place where I needed to be, but it was just it astounded me how 1 minute you could look at someone and have a normal conversation, and then in the next second they turn into a completely different person, a human being, and like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right?
Yeah.
And I could never understand that, and I knew that wasn't my kind of. I said, no, I think I'll just stick to blood, guts, and open wounds. But yeah, anybody who goes into that field of whole psychology is kudos to you. Like, yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that most people with mental illness never commit a violent act in their life.
Yeah.
There's just that handful of the mentally ill that that do cause serious problems. But there's a lot of people out there that you wouldn't identify as mentally ill, but yet they're violent killers. Or they're malignant narcissists who don't care about anyone but themselves, and they'll walk over their mother to get to what they want.
Yeah.
No conscience, a definite sociopath, psychopath.
And a narcissist.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
everything's supposed to revolve around them.
Right. Yeah.
And if it doesn't, they get angry and lash out. It's a shame that we haven't progressed enough to identify the distinctively mentally ill people from the violent sociopaths in our community.
Yeah.
Because they need a different kind of help. If you've got someone with social personality disorder, it is highly unlikely that there is nothing you can do to ever bring that person around to where they think like a normal person. It is they always feel victimized and put upon and do not understand why everyone doesn't believe every word from their lips and doesn't do everything that they tell them to do. They don't understand it, because to them, there's only one life that is important, and that is their own.
The FBI is still trying to develop profiles, aren't they, of serial killers? It changes all the time.
They are always working on perfecting their models.
Mm-hmm.
And with any kind of societal changes that come about, there are going to be changes in how psychopaths and sociopaths operate. I mean, there was a time where you go back far enough in this country, if you were a stranger and you came into town, everybody knew it within 5 minutes. You stood out immediately. But you take your average city now, you could throw 1,000 people in there that had never been there before. Nobody would notice. It's just because we've gotten so big, and because we don't have to do all our business face to face.
Yeah.
That people can pull scams and cheat people and manipulate people into becoming victims.
Well, there was a time in this country when people didn't even lock their doors.
Exactly. And I live in a neighborhood where a lot of people don't lock their doors. I did not grow up here, so I always do. But it's there are places that still seem as innocent as back then, except that they don't have the protection of knowing that evil is not going to drop in and run them over.
Right.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
How do psychopaths think? What motivates the criminal mind? How do people justify the crimes they commit and rationalize their actions? Diane Fanning has been studying this for decades and writes the stories of their crimes in best-selling true crime books. As she says, sometimes it's something that warped the person in that way growing up. Sometimes it's genetics, and sometimes we don't really know why. Many of these people are not mentally ill, but they're violent killers. These people lack a conscience. Diane is a well-known and highly accomplished true crime author and mystery novelist. She unravels information about heinous crimes and the impact they have on the people and in the communities where they occurred. Diane's book, written in cold blood, was nominated for the highly coveted Edgar Allen Poe Award. She's highly sought after. She's been talking about some of the cases she's covered and how she copes to rid herself of the negativity of the criminals she covers in the valuable work she's doing to create awareness about the evil that can lurk just around the corner. You know, Diane, it would be nice if we could
go back in time where we don't have to expect evil, but it is there. And I think in many ways, social media has made us more vulnerable because evil can come from anywhere and reach out and touch you from thousands of miles away.
Yes, but it also, I think, has made a lot of us more aware. The way news is, when I was growing up, I mean, if something happened on the other side of the world, you weren't going to hear it that night. It'll be a couple of days.
Sure.
Or if you're living in Virginia and there's a crime in California, you may never hear about it. But now we are all hearing about stuff that goes on all over the world, where there's a web of connection that makes us more aware of the wrongdoings that happen. And I think it makes us feel more threatened. I'm not so sure that as far as being the victim of a violent crime, I'm not so sure if the odds are not still in our favor. I think, yes, there's more people. I don't know that a greater percentage of them are evil. I think that maybe it's just there are more of them.
Yeah.
And it's always been that way, that a certain portion of any population is going to be evil.
Right. I know that it's got to be scary for parents today.
God.
You just want to, keep your child under wraps and protect them, because they can be so vulnerable.
Yes, and it's funny, what happened to me when I was 9.
Yeah.
Did anybody think, oh, that means I shouldn't be walking through the neighborhood or riding bikes through the neighborhood? No, I was still doing that. It was, since nothing happened to me, that one event did not scar the community. But you take a community where a child is abducted and murdered, and you have a community that is forever damaged and forever feels vulnerable to violence.
Oh, sure. And you've covered a lot of those stories.
Yes. And really, when I'm doing these stories, more important than the crime itself to me is the impact of the crime on all the people that are surrounding the story and on the community where it occurred. It just causes such a shift in perception, a loss of any feeling of safety, and until whoever did it is caught, a lack of trust
Sure.
in your neighbors even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I watch those crime shows all the time, and it's so much bigger than what we think it is, how it affects the community, the neighbors, you know, the ripple effect just extends so far,
Yeah.
and it touches everybody. It's not just the one person. And it stays for a long time. So sad.
And sometimes it leaves a permanent mark, like Bobby Joe Stinnett's murder in Skidmore,
Yeah.
Missouri. That was one of a long list of crimes that took place in that area in a period of time. And that place just feels haunted. You go there and everybody is paranoid about why you're there. You're not allowed to go into some public places because they don't know who you are. That place has been traumatized, and it's shrinking as well.
I had the honor of narrating that book, Baby Be Mine, Diane, and I must admit, I walked away from that book going, I never want to go to that town to visit. Never.
Mm.
Because it seemed like per capita, they had a lot of murders.
Yeah, they did, and
Mhm.
what was so weird to me was, there were people out there who had watched the town kill the town bully, and no one will point a finger. No one. And then you had in Bobby Joe's family, you had 3 murders that, they only solved one of them.
Yeah. How do you go about investigating the different cases that you want to cover when you're going to be writing a book? Do you go to the library? Do you go to the courts? And then do you go into the prison system and try to have a face-to-face with the convicted?
Yeah, well, I try to contact anybody I can that might know anything.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I always do when I'm talking to someone who I know had a relationship to the crime is I ask them at the end, I'll ask them, well, what didn't I ask that I should have? And I also ask them, who else should I talk to? And that often it leads me to a bonanza. I find people who were never mentioned in news stories, who just were peripheral, but to the crime, but knew an awful lot about the people.
Mm-hmm. The problem with news stories when things aren't current and breaking and everything else, it's like the news stops. You never really hear the rest of the story. And that's where you're giving a complete picture.
Yeah, yeah. And, the other thing with when I start out writing a book, if the crime is fresh, I'll be writing certain facts certain ways, and then as time goes on while I'm working on the book, I'll find out, whoops, that wasn't right. That might have been what they thought early on, but it didn't turn out to be the case. And the newspaper people are at a disadvantage because they've got to write a story right then. They
Right.
can't wait to find out if there's any holes in it. They just got to write and publish.
Yep.
And then after the fact, they might find out, oh, well, no, that was the wrong location or the wrong day or something. And they get a lot of criticism for it, but sometimes you just can't help it. Like there was on a 48-hour show, there was a blatantly wrong statement about Tommy Lynn Sells. And the reason there was that there was a deputy who was trying to insert himself into the story. So he claimed to have seen Sells doing something that Sells didn't do because he wanted the attention.
Okay.
So you just don't, there's a lot of that. And you have to sort through it and pull apart even what seems to be the most credible stories, looking for the flaws in them and the things that just don't add up.
So you're actually a private detective in addition to being an author.
Well, in a way, because it's like sometimes when you're going in depth like that, you stumble across something that nobody has noticed before. When I was writing about Mark Vonitz, I found his arrest for exposure to 2 little girls, and I looked at the documents from that courthouse and found a name that I'd never heard before. And I asked sheriff's office, do you know this name? It says that person is his next of kin. And nobody knew who she was, but there it was in black and white. And I finally chased the woman down. And it turns out that when she left her first husband, who was Mark Ivanitz's father, she legally changed her name. And that was who she was. It was his mother. And nobody knew where his mother had gone because, except for, Mark, and his sister. But authorities didn't know where she had gone. They didn't know what her new name was. But that's how I ended up getting to talk to her.
Okay. Do you ever feel like when you're doing basically an investigation to put together the book unsafe? Because I imagine that you can run into people who simply don't want you, nosing around in their mind, right?
Well, yeah, I have. But there's moments of feeling unsafe, of being, quite frankly, very frightened, or alleviated by knowing that there's so many decent people out there.
Mm-hmm.
There were every story I've done, there's always been people who wanted to help me and wanted to help me find the truth. And it kind of balances things out. You just don't know what you're going to run into. And some of my problems have been just having to go into neighborhoods I didn't want to go into. But I did it anyway because it had to be done.
Sure. Well, that takes courage. You definitely have intestinal fortitude and, as Kathy said, kahunas. I mean, for which you do.
I'm very impressed. I got to tell you. Oh my gosh. I couldn't do what you do, honestly. Like it would creep me right out. I would be like, oh my God.
Well, Kathy, I just wanted to write a book. And when I got my opportunity, when I got a contract, I thought, well, I'm committed now. I got to do it.
Sarah, yeah. And you've been active in doing wonderful things for women. The book Gone Forever, Domestic Violence Shelters, consider that a pivotal book for women. Did you want to touch on that briefly? Because I love all your nonprofit involvement and everything too.
Well, it was very sad what happened to Susan McFarland. I've cried a lot over Susan. She was such a good and kind woman. And she did so much when she was going to leave her husband to try to make the transition smoother for him because she knew he wasn't that good at taking care of himself. So she lined up a place for him to live, paid several months in advance. I mean, she was really looking out for him. But when he found out, that's when he killed her. And that brings a realization that the most dangerous time in any woman's life is that period before they're getting ready to leave, up to about 2 years after they leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's when many women die.
Yeah.
Because some men cannot handle the thought that any woman would ever leave them. And it makes them think violent thoughts and do violent things.
Yeah. And I'm a survivor of 7.5 years intense domestic violence, strangled 3 times, lived with a shovel on my porch as a reminder of what I'd be buried with. He stalked me. Like, I had a bodyguard. It was horrible trying to get away. And well, when I did get away, I call it the great escape. So I understand 100% how awful it is and how difficult.
Yes. And, women try to leave all the time. And
I'm very lucky to be alive. Very lucky.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And many don't make it. And
No.
it's Time Is Up is an excellent book by a woman who worked closely in domestic violence, and she's no longer with us, but she left behind this roadmap of how to get away without getting killed.
Wow. What's the name of that book again?
Time Is Up.
Time Is Up. Okay.
Gonna look that up.
Yeah, because domestic violence, all of that, it's still way too prevalent. I mean, it shouldn't exist at all. And people don't talk about it. It's like that dirty little secret nobody wants to talk about. And women need to be very mindful of these things.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's if you're not aware, for many women, the first automatic response when he punches you in the face is, oh my God, I've got to clean up my act. I've really pushed him too far. But no, your first reaction should be, that's it. But for many women, it isn't, because they blame themselves.
Yeah, they do. They blame themselves. Yep.
And it's really very sad to see women, both because they blame themselves and others because they're in fear, because they've been told repeatedly, if you leave me, I will hunt you down and kill you.
Isn't that what
Yeah.
you heard, Kathy?
100%. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
And not just you, your child, your family, the threat are endless. Your dog. You threatened my dog, because my dog was my baby. Like, just anything that will hurt you, right?
Yes, yes.
So,
And some of them carry through on some of those threats.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah,
Yeah, and it's chilling. And one of the worst parts, I think, for a lot of women to understand when they're in this position is, how did I ever think this was the right man for me?
Well, a lot of these men masquerade. You don't know.
Yes, they
Yeah,
do, and
that's
they
right,
don't.
yeah.
But when they're doing that self-examination, let's say you successfully get out of a relationship like that, and you look back at what you've done, and you just wonder if you're just a bad man picker. I
Yes.
didn't come from a very physically violent situation in my first marriage, but I came from a lot of mental and psychological abuse, and there were some minor physical things involved in that. But mostly it was just beating me down till I got to the point before I left him, that if I saw friends of mine coming up the street, I would cross the street so they wouldn't feel obliged to talk to me, because he had convinced me that they only talk to me because they feel sorry for me.
Wow. So you have no support system. They want to rob you of that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you have no place to turn. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry you went through that, Diane.
But
They should-
I think I am as strong as I am today because I did survive that
Mhm.
and transform my life.
Mm-hmm. It shapes us
It does. It does.
100%.
And Diane, you're paying it forward with these books. You're creating awareness. Even though a lot of these cases are downright creepy, they are educational. And it gets
Yep.
people's eyes aware and eyes open on what is out there. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage. And you're a fabulous writer, and you can weave a story that's very compelling. I mean, you've got a ton of the nonfiction books.
Mommy's Little Girl. That's the story of Casey Anthony, which made national headlines.
Of course, Baby Be Mine, Bobby Joe Stinnett, and all of these different books you continue to write. I highly suggest people check out your website, because you not only do the nonfiction, but you also do mystery novels too.
Yes.
There's a variety for everybody.
Well, and I think I've always looked towards something new in every book I write. That's what draws me to it. Something where I feel like I can learn from it. And when I wrote Bitter Remains, it was kind of shocking to me that such a horrible, violent crime only came about because of a child custody battle.
Wow.
And that is tremendously frightening.
That was the Laura Ackerson murder?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, custody battles, all of that stuff is so emotionally charged.
Yes.
Women can be in serious danger.
Just with that kind of stuff. And this educates people.
This sort of thing can happen.
Well, I have a new book coming out that's very different from anything else I've ever done. Because although it is about a true crime figure, it is written as fiction, and it's a true crime figure that most people are aware of. The name of the book is Lizzie. Do you know who I could be writing about?
Lizzie Borden?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And what I try to do is, I think her crime was fueled by rage. And so, and I believe she was a bit of a narcissist. And I look at the reasons, and a lot of her rage to me was justifiable, and that centered around the forced financial dependency of women.
Mm, yeah.
And the way that so many were forced into putting up with things just because there was no way they could make a living.
That's true. She was seriously controlled by her father.
Yes, by society in general, for that matter.
Yep.
There were such strict rules on how to behave, and she never married. And it made sense. She was bitter against being so controlled by her father. And why did she want someone else to control her?
That's true. Yeah,
Because that's the way it was then. I mean,
Yeah.
up till 1974, for heaven's sakes, a woman could not go and get a credit card in her own name without her husband's permission.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I think even checking accounts.
Yes. So as soon as that happened, I went straight into a bank and applied for a credit card. Not that I was planning on buying anything, but just that I wanted to have something in my name.
Yeah. And it still took decades for women, even if they were married and they had their name and social security number in the United States on a particular loan or something, the husband was the one who got the credit. I mean, it still was not balanced.
Correct.
And yet women motivated most of the buying decisions and have for many, many decades. But yet.
Yes, indeed. I think a lot of times many younger women do not understand how far some of their grandmothers had to travel to get to this point.
That's right. It's been a fight. Well, we've only had the right to vote in the United States for a little over 100 years.
Yep.
That's not a long time.
Mm-mm. We surely weren't the first country to do it.
No, we weren't. That's very true. I think England, didn't they get the right to vote there first?
Yes.
Yep.
And if you look at the Sikh community in India, they have been promoting women's equality for more than 500 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well, there actually are some men out there who grew up without that kind of bias. Even far between, but they're there.
Wouldn't that be nice to experience that across the world? I think that's
Our world would be a much better place.
for sure.
I think so too. Yeah.
But it's baby steps. We have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
When I was young and 18, I was certain that there would be no sexism by the time I was an older woman. Well, guess what? And I thought that about racism too, but it's all still there, just leering with its ugly face.
Right. We just have to keep working at it.
Yep.
Diane, you are a wealth of information. This has been a thrill. Where do people find your books? Because I highly recommend they check them out.
Well, Amazon, of course, you can find my books in paperback and digital on Amazon. Audible has almost most every one of my books you can get as an Audible book. And you can also find them at Barnes & Noble, and they're just pretty much any place you can buy books, you can get it. If you go into a bookstore, as long as the book's still in print, they can order it and have it for you. So that you don't have to go in there and see a shelf that doesn't have what you're looking for. You can ask the bookstore and they will order it for you.
And you also have a number of your books as audiobooks too.
Oh, yes. Almost all of my books are audiobooks.
Okay.
So, yes, you can scoff those up. My whole 7-book Lucinda Pierce series is available in audio.
Excellent. And people can find you on dianefanning.com.
Yes, they can every day of the week.
Excellent.
Even when I'm hiding back in my closet and not wanting to talk to anybody, the website is always there.
You are a fascinating lady, Diane. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been, I've always wanted to ask a true crime writer, what's it like? You know?
Yeah.
I'm blown away. I really am. Like, thank you so much for being on the show. My gosh.
You are welcome. And here's to all the women out there who are facing a battle at home. Let's wish them all the best of luck in escaping any kind of violence or intimidation they're facing.
Amen. That is a wonderful statement to make, Diane. Very profound and very, very true. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. And if you want to hear more episodes of Women Road Warriors or learn more about our show, be sure to check out womenroadwarriors.com. And please follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. On our website, we also have a selection of podcasts just for women. They're a series of podcasts from different podcasters. So if you're in the mood for women's podcasts, just click the Power Network tab on womenroadwarriors.com. You'll have a variety of shows to listen to anytime you want to. Podcasts made for women. Women Road Warriors is on all the major podcast channels like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, YouTube, and others. Check us out. And please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a topic or feedback, email us at sjohnson@womenroadwarriors.com.